Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with me, Bill Reimer, your reluctant prophet. I often mention that I taught total quality in my previous life, although now I'm retired. One of the chief principles in teaching total quality is to give people the tools and information to do their job correctly the first time. And that involves giving the worker problem-solving tools so that when they encounter problems on the shop floor, they can solve them for themselves within their team. It's called a Kaizen effort. People are expecting that our politicians are going to solve our problems for us. And I'm here to tell you that that belief is one based on complete and utter delusion. We need to understand the nature of the problems we're facing for ourselves in order to involve ourselves in the process of correcting them. Today we are being governed. We aren't being governed, rather. We're being lorded over by a cadre of liars whose aim is to hide their extortion of the Canadian taxpayers' money. This is a species of corruption so vile that it has now become endemic to our utterly unscrupulous political class who no longer answer to their constituents, but rather to an international cartel of carpetbaggers. But why precisely have many people been so taken in by the transparent falsehoods of pathological narcissists like Trudeau? This will be the topic of today's discussion. So let us begin with this. Make no mistake, Canada has been captured by radical political Islam with all that implies. Murder, tyranny, and illiberalism is being funded by Trudeau's excessive taxation. For this reason, it is my concerted opinion that Trudeau has committed treason. Since most people are not deep thinkers, nor do they care to develop an even rudimentary understanding of the faith, the philosophy, and the cultural traditions that underpin the Western way of life. Many have surrendered themselves to cultural genocide by the parasitical empathy being promoted in our universities' humanities departments, the political class who have been indoctrinated by these ideologues, whose wicked creed is in turn being advanced by the government-funded Fourth Estate. Almost everyone is sensing that something has gone deeply awry with social cohesion, law and order, good government, and societal norms, but have become too preoccupied with everyday concerns to even ponder why we are facing an existential crisis. The answer to the emergence of the collectivist mindset in Canada, which has traditionally been a nation built on rugged individualism, must therefore be examined. To do that, I will quote from Chapter 2 of Michael Claire-Neeson's seminal treatise on the pathological nature of socialist thinking. I want to remind my audience that I would never have come to understand the malignant, narcissistic coercion of democratic socialism had I not lived in Norway for a few years. So let us examine what our friend Mikkel has to state about Scandinavian mentality. And here I will read from Chapter 2 of his book, Manipulism and the Weapon of Guilt, Collectivism Exposed. Collectivists will read this book, but in an attempt to deny the evidence, they will not read it thoroughly. Instead, they subconsciously will look for ways to distract themselves from the facts. Any excuse is valid. If it is not looking for spelling mistakes, then it will be looking for research errors. Then they would want to see proof of a PhD, and even a PhD would not be enough, unless, of course, one uses the PhD to establish how happy Danes are. A collectivist will always deny, belittle, and intimidate, but never truly research. Severe pathological narcissism, more precisely a mindset referred to in psychology as magical thinking, is the key to collectivism's progression, survival, and continuance. I once sat admiring my daughter, age 6, doing crazy things interactively with a children's program on TV. At one point, she glanced at me, smiled, and said, "Am I not skilled, Daddy?" "Yes, you are very, very clever," I replied. The situation made me think about the mental freedom that my daughter still possesses, a mental freedom still liberated from my country's oppressive, collectivist mentality. The right to be her unique self and confidently express herself freely. She will be deprived of this mental freedom by Marxism's powerful emotional iron grip here in Denmark if I do not teach her how to protect herself from it. This mental prison is an oppressive, collectivist mentality that has been misunderstood and misinterpreted through almost a century. It is perceived simply to be Scandinavian culture described as the Yenta law. The Yenta law, subliminal conditioning, or malignant, narcissistic coercion. So let's read its 10 rules. I've read them often before in the past, but because Mikkel quotes them in this chapter, I'll read them again. Rule 1, don't think you're anything special. Rule 2, don't think you're as good as us. Rule 3, don't think you are wiser than us. Rule 4, don't convince yourself that you're better than us. Rule 5, don't think you know more than us. Rule 6, don't think you are more important than us. Rule 7, don't think you're good at any. My favorite. Rule 8, don't laugh at us. I was at a performance of a famous local blues artist named J.W. Jones. He was performing in Buckley's in Oslo. And he took the stage and he was holding a bottle of water, and everything in Norway is extremely expensive. And he looked at the water and he looked out at the crowd and said, "What do people put in this water that could make it cost this much money?" You could hear a pin drop in that audience. You can't make fun of them. They'll freak. Rule 9, don't think anyone cares about you. And Rule 10, don't think you can teach us anything. The Yenta law was first described in the novel A Fugitive Crosses His Track in 1933 by Danish author Axel Sandemosa. His observations and thoughts describe the consequences of more or less 3/4 of a century of continuous advancement of oppressive collectivist mentality in the Danish society. The fictional Danish town of Yenta lives by its own 10 commandments, named the Yenta Law. This slow intellectual process of radicalization started roughly a few decades before the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848 by the Germans Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, when the utopian idea of socialism was originally presented in the United States in 1825 by Robert Owen, a Welshman. The Yenta law is unquestionably not a unique Scandinavian phenomenon. The mentality is known worldwide in the Commonwealth countries such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and in mother country of Great Britain, it is referred to as tall poppy syndrome, a pejorative term that is more frequently used in the most socialistic influenced of these nations. Hopped ahead. The term is also referred to as schadenfreude, referring to someone envious and scornful who takes pleasure in demeaning others. A loan word used in English from the German word schadenfroh, which is commonly used in the democratic socialism countries of Scandinavia, i.e. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, as well as in Russia. behind the former communist Iron Curtain, the mentality is also known as hell. Example in Poland is Polish hell. In all cases, these syndromes are uniquely linked to Marxism, the notion of social equality, all forms of fascism, whether called crab mentality in the Philippines, if I can't have it, neither can you, or the Yenta law in Scandinavia, don't think you are more than others, the tall poppy syndrome in Marxist influenced Commonwealth countries, cutting down the tall poppy, or Schadenfreude in former Nazi occupied Germany, these syndromes all describe the same condition of pathological narcissism that thrives commonly in collectivism on undermining and is driven by severe inferiority complex. Depending on how severely deprived the person's self-esteem is, the consequent result can be narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. Narcissistic behaviors occur as defense mechanisms, described as a lack of ability to take criticism as a result of low self-worth or feeling inferior in certain situations. We are all born as narcissists and gradually mature our immature narcissistic ego into a healthy subconscious adult identity. Unhealthy narcissism appears in this stage of development if the process of the emerging individual self is by some means interrupted. Should narcissistic behaviors or feelings occur frequently, be strong or tough to control, then this is then referred to in psychology as pathological narcissism. Frequently, this is caused by poor standards set by others, such as intervention by parents, friends, and society. Hotchkiss, 7 Deadly Sins of Narcissism. Hotchkiss identified what she called the 7 deadly sins of narcissism. Shamelessness. Shame is a feeling that lurks beneath all unhealthy narcissism and the inability to process shame in healthy ways. Magical thinking. Narcissists see themselves as perfect, using distortion and illusion known as magical thinking. They also use projection to dump shame onto others. Arrogance. A narcissist who is feeling deflated may reinflate by diminishing, debasing, or degrading someone else. Envy. A narcissist may secure a sense of superiority in the face of another person's ability by using contempt to minimize the other person. Entitlement. Narcissists hold unreasonable expectations of particularly favorable treatment and automatic compliance because they consider themselves special. Failure to comply is considered an attack on their superiority, and the perpetrator is considered an awkward or difficult person. Defiance of their will is a narcissistic injury that can trigger narcissistic rage. I can't tell you how often I've been referred to as difficult. Exploitation can take many forms, but always involves the exploitation of others without regret for their feelings or interests. Often the other is in a subservient position where resistance would be difficult or even impossible. Sometimes the subservience is not so much real as it is assumed. Bad boundaries. Narcissists do not recognize that they have boundaries and that others are separate and are not extensions of themselves. Others either exist to meet their needs or may as well not exist at all. Those who provide narcissistic supply to the narcissist are treated as if they are part of the narcissist and are expected to live up to those expectations. In the mind of a narcissist, there is no boundary between self and other. The narcissist feels emotionally threatened when other individuals appear confident or challenging, creating an urge to belittle, intimidate, or humiliate. This is referred to in psychology as malignant narcissism. These emotions are caused by arrogance and envy and are triggered by criticisms, undesired reality, facts, and insights, or anything that appears superior to the narcissist's sense of self-worth, characterized in psychology by the sense of entitlement. What better place to be for the narcissist, to be worshipped, to be in a superior mind-controlling position, such as psychiatry, tutoring, media, or politics? That's why our politicians are invariably given over to this mindset, or to be part of a completely collective society adapted to these coercive, narcissistic societal manners and the resultant universal pathological narcissism, where everyone expresses themselves as equals. That's why they're always demanding equality of outcome. Though nearly an exact description of oppressive collectivist mentality, Sandemosa's novel still has a few inconsistencies. One example is that one is allowed to think greatly of oneself, but is intimidated into never expressing it in obvious ways. I have therefore carefully clarified the mentality for which basis I elaborate in the following description of the mentality's behavior that is, though minutely different, the mentality known around the world as tall poppy syndrome. The tall poppy syndrome, with its origins in Australia, dates back to the 1860s, just after the Communist Manifesto was published. It refers to a powerful yet common mentality that people of all countries are subject to in some degree. Symptoms include bullying as a completely normal part of any child's process of building identity and self-esteem. Among adults, contemptuous behavior and malignant narcissism is routinely performed by envious, immature people who are driven by severe pathological narcissism and lack initiative, and as a result, exploit the easy way by trying to bring down surrounding individuals to their low level of accomplishment. Consequently, depending on a country's level of radical collectivist influence, the mentality, when adopted by collectivists and continued into adulthood, is unequivocally transformed into manipulism. Excerpt taken from Chapter 2 of Manipulism and the Weapon of Guilt, Collectivism Exposed by Michael Claire Neeson, with the link to that book after that section. My summating thoughts. As I have stated many times in my blogs and on my podcasts, without my experiences of living in an intensely social collectivist society like Norway, I would not have been prepared to expose the dangers of this vicious, manipulating mindset, which now embodies the woke policies of our insidious political class and bureaucracy endemic to the government of Justin Trudeau. If anything shocks me, it is how quickly we have been forced down an Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. I would have never believed it was possible for Canadians to exchange their traditional rugged individualism for a parasitical mindset which is destroying social cohesion, economic prosperity, and the rule of law, and replacing it with radical political Islam. Yet here we are. As Trump shouted after rising to his feet when he was nearly shot dead, "Fight, fight, fight. I will never surrender my country to this vicious mind virus without expending my all to end it." These are things to think and pray about on this Saturday, November the 23rd. I hope you will begin to ponder these questions. They have to be addressed. And you can't expect politicians, the very ones that have caused these issues, because they're just repeating what they heard in the humanities departments they've graduated from. They're repeating the same toxic ideology. They've been captured by it. For your mind, think for yourself, and pray like you've never prayed before, for it will take divine intervention for God to deliver us from this pathological mind virus.